Hello, amazing teachers. I'm excited to talk to you about some tips and ideas for today's lesson. Let's talk about modeling for your students, meaning to walk students through an example. Before we do, let's just review what we talked about last week, the idea of focusing your lesson so you don't run out of time. For example, you can break down the headings of each of the sections of the lesson and then assign how much time you want to spend on each. This is just an example of how you might do it for today. Now, in the lesson, you'll see that there's a portion where you read 1 Nephi 19 through 23. I'm going to recommend that you tell your students, go down in that verse to the word Isaiah, and then read after that. So whoever's going to read it, read just this section. And the reason is the next question says, how would you describe in your own words the truth Nephi is teaching? Well, there's at least a couple of truths in here. So as not to confuse the students, I would just focus on the area that you want, and I might reword the question because of that and just say, why did Nephi liken all scripture to his people? Students can then identify clearly that it might be for our profit and learning. And that might be something you want to write on the board in a simplified fashion. Likening scriptures equals profit and learning. That principle is expanded a little bit more articulately in the next section. As we liken the scriptures to ourselves, we will learn and profit from them. So this next question is a great one. What do you know about likening the scriptures? And remember that we can invite students by name. Sarah, what do you know about likening the scriptures? Now, instead of the next question being a separate question that we might ask somebody else, which we could, you might consider asking it as a follow-up question. That's great, Sarah. Have you had any experience with likening the scriptures? This might be the right approach for certain students. If you ask students this question and they have a hard time thinking of an answer, you might want to prime the pump by asking them to think of a favorite scripture. Now, why is it your favorite? This might be a great way to help students to recognize, oh, yeah, I like that scripture because it really connects with my life in this way. Now the next part, now you can have the students read the entire verse and ask what was Nephi's purpose in reading and likening the words of Isaiah. What follows is an activity to help the students to actually try it for themselves. So it gives you 4 steps. Find important details, make comparisons to your life, discover valuable lessons, and determine personal application. Now, this next part walks students through how they might do that in this set of verses that describe the event surrounding Nephi breaking his bow. What I'd recommend is this is the opportunity for you to model for your students. Give them an example to work through, because later in the lesson, students will have an opportunity to do this again and apply it in their own circumstance. So maybe give them a situation that could help them work through these steps. So first, you go through the materials, reading or using the video, depending on the needs of your students. Remember, depending on your class, one is not necessarily better than the other. Now have them identify details. Here are the details. Make comparisons to your life. Think of aspects of your life that relate to the details in this previous step. What situations in my life are like the situations in these verses? To help the students think of a situation in their life, you might want to introduce a scenario that they can think about. For example, a young woman is very faithful, goes to church, reads her scriptures, says her prayers, is faithful. Her father has just accepted a new job and the whole family needs to move. When they get to their new location, things are hard. She has a difficult time at school. She doesn't like the culture. She doesn't like the classes. She's having a hard time making friends. And that would be bad enough, except that her dad doesn't like his new job and her mother doesn't like the neighborhood they're living in. Now, if we go to step 3, think about what you learn from the scriptures that could apply to you. The question here is, what are some lessons you learned from the account of Nephi breaking and repairing his bow that could apply to your life? First of all, Nephi did not repair his bow. As you know, he replaced his bow. So maybe let's reword that question. What are some lessons you learned from the account of Nephi breaking and creating a new bow that could apply to your life? Now, at this point, students might be saying any sorts of answers. For example, one might say, God rewards effort. Another might say, don't give up when things look dark. Another, just because others murmur doesn't mean we have to. Some of these might be lessons specific to the story, and some might need to be encouraged a bit more to understand a lesson that's eternal and applies to everyone. If this is the case, you might consider priming the pump by saying, great lessons, thank you. Help me finish this one. If we put forth our own effort and seek the Lord's direction, well, that can help bring students right to this doctrine. If we say the first part, help them to come up with something that applies to the second part. See how this lesson or this truth makes sure that it shows our effort and seeking the Lord's direction, and then the promises that can come as a result. So now let's take that lesson, that truth, and apply it to the scenario that we talked about. The young lady with her family having moved, everybody is feeling miserable. We determine personal application by reflecting on our own life, or in this case, on the scenario. What are some ways you can apply this truth? Have the students think about what Nephi did in the story and how it could inspire the young woman in this story in a way that she can access the Lord to help her through her difficulties. Now, your students might be those who have lots of their own experiences they want to share, in which case, great. Feel free to have them use that in this exercise. But remember, once we've gone through, once we've modeled how to do it, whether using your students' experiences or using this scenario that I shared, they can now go on to the next one and try to follow those same steps, but use their own experiences and apply it. I know I shared a lot, but I hope there's something in there that's just the right thing to help you with your lesson tomorrow. May the Lord bless you to make it wonderful.